So learning and memory, two extremely important functions linked to so many conditions. Of course, we will go over mostly to Alzheimer, but the chapter of dementia it's quite big. So you have a large number of condition, and there is a strict anatomical correlates. Remember actually this to link always structure to function. Classically, the hippocampus has been linked to learning and memory. As you know, this is a structure that is in temporal lobe, and you will see this structure on those slides, the hippocampus. In temporal lobe, you have another structure that is anterior. You will see this structure in the anterior process section, which is the amygdala. This is an area that is linked to emotion. Then we have the nucleus accumbens, which is still, it's part of a different system, basal ganglia, but functionally it's connected to the limbic system itself, that it's such an important part in regulating emotion and so on. And now you have a prefrontal cortex, which is the classical area for cognition. So that's the characteristic of the limbic system, guys. So you have a series of functions that require a very large network, and those structures are located in very different areas of the brain. Okay, so even you might have a structure that we discussed in a different system, like in the diencephalon, hypothalamus. Remember, hypothalamus is important for autonomic nervous system, but we express our emotion through the activation of autonomic nervous system. So hypothalamus kick in also in the limbic system. So it's really a series of structures that belong to multiple systems. But those are the main structure, if you want. And so those structures are deep. So inside the temporal lobe, but also in the midline structure. First, remember actually this thing. In here you see the olfactory bulb. Olfaction. So think how olfaction is important, especially for evolution. Sexual behavior, predator behavior, feeding behavior, and so on. So it's really a very, very important, and there are specific memory for olfactory memory. Imagine a mammals, remembering a smell reminiscent of a predator can save lives. So those olfactory memory are very important. During evolution, we lost some of this, but they're still present. If you have, something, a very stressful event, and there was, a fire, the first thing you remember will be the bad smell of that fire. So it's still, the olfactory memory are very, very important, also for social interaction and everything. So olfactory bulb, which is the first cranial nerve, it's also part of the limbic system because it has a role in specific form of memory and emotion. So you get the olfactory bulb right here that you remember, it's below the frontal lobe in the orbitofrontal cortex. Then you have the septum. Remember, in between you have the septum pellucidum. This is the little area that separates the ventricle. But there are some tissue, there are some nuclei, bunch of neurons that form the septal nuclei. Those are all part of specific pathway relevant for memory. If you consider the two hemispheres, you make a cut in the middle and you look at the sagittal question, above the corpus callosum, you have the cingulate gyrus. That's also a super important area for regulation of emotion, specifically for anxiety. So cingulate gyrus. Then you have mammillary body. You remember mammillary body are at the bottom. So if this is the brain, they are part of the diencephalon and are right here on the bottom, the base of cranium. The mammillary body are attached to the fornix, which is a structure that has a C shape, okay, pretty much like this. So imagine a mammillary body and then attach this C-shaped structure, fornix. So you see in here, mammillary body, and then you get the fornix here. You will not see in all the cross section this, because part of this you see in the midline, some other get inside the two hemispheres. Okay, and you have the parahippocampal gyrus, hippocampus, and at the end the amygdala. So you have this kind of sequence: mammillary body, fornix, parahippocampal gyrus, hippocampal, and amygdala at the end. It's some kind of circle. Imagine like a very big C letter. You start from a mammillary body and end up inside the temporal lobe where the amygdala is located. And the hypothalamus, as I told you, extremely important for emotion, still limbic system. And also there is a special area, guys. You see here subcallosal gyrus. So you know that the corpus callosum has multiple portion, but there is a little portion here below the corpus callosum. This portion of corpus callosum is called genu. It's called subgenual area. Make a little note about this. This is an area, it's just below, right here. This area, it's very, very important, guys, because you remember that we did deep brain stimulation to treat Parkinson. We insert an electrodes and to control the shaking and the bradykinesia and everything. There is a treatment for depression, refractory depression for people that are suicidal, and so very severe form of depression. In this case, we will insert the electrode in this area right here. Okay, it's sort of, you know, some author define this as the area of happiness. So if you see a picture of those patients, when the stimulator is off, they are very, very sad. Then they turn this thing on, and a big smile pops in right away. So this is an area that is very, very important for that. It's still part of the limbic system. And many, many other. This is just a summary of the structure, the main structure that are there. But there are some other, because the network for emotion and learning, it's very, very large. So now look here at the different color. Okay, what you see in blue, it's the limbic area. Remember this area, orbitofrontal cortex? You remember when we did, or probably on the first lecture, you remember when we did all those, and I told you, socially appropriate behavior, emotional response. So again, frontal lobe, but functionally, also this area is part of the limbic system. Then you have the subgenual area, the one that I told you right now, below the corpus callosum. Then you have the cingulate gyrus, parahippocampal cortex, hippocampus. At the end, you have the amygdala inside here. So you see, it spans through multiple lobes. You know that this is the insular lobe. A portion of the insula is considered part of the limbic system, guys, because it's very important for the emotional component of pain. If you are in chronic pain, you are depressed, you cry, you have lack of motivation, and so on, all those emotional symptoms related to pain are linked to dysfunction of the insular lobe. So you see, insular lobe, besides gustatory cortex and many other things, face recognition, but also the emotional component of pain. And in here, on a similar cross-section that you see in the slide that you did to identify, you will see pretty much, you know, those structures. So here you have the orbitofrontal cortex, okay? And don't forget that here you have also the olfactory bulb that is there. Then you have the subgenual area, the genu of corpus callosum. Then you have the cingulate cortex. parahippocampal, hippocampal, and amygdala. Okay, so consider just a sagittal structure, and you see all those, it's like going in circle above the corpus callosum and deep into the temporal lobe. Okay, those are the cross section that you see. So in some cross section you see the cingulate gyrus, which is above the corpus callosum. In some other you will see the hippocampus, which is right here, or the amygdala, is right there. Remember, the amygdala is anterior. Okay, it's clear, guys, that this is a circle of structure and everything. Just remember those, but we have many other, and now we will do more in detail. In here you have the representation of the olfactory bulb. You see those fibers, they go deep into temporal lobe, so you have several areas that will regulate specifically those memory, olfactory memory. So in a very schematic way, amygdala, emotion, hippocampus, learning and memory. So here we have a cross section of the anterior portion of the temporal lobe, and in the anterior portion you find the amygdala, look here, which is attached to the hippocampus, which you will find in a posterior cross section. What it means, amygdala? It's clear, guys, this you visualize that. We will go deeper now into those structures, so there's time actually to clarify them. So in your cross section that you have, you will have some slides that look exactly like this. So you will have the basal ganglia, the thalamus and everything, and then you have a portion of temporal lobe. You know that in the temporal lobe you have two main structures, hippocampus and amygdala. Anterior is amygdala, which amygdala in Greek it means almond. So it has a rather, an almond shape, almost circular. So if you see a structure that is circular, is the amygdala. Instead, the hippocampus has a funnier shape that I will show you later. It's a collection of nuclei. You see in here, we have so many nuclei in the amygdala, guys. Each week there is a new publication in which they discover a new bunch of neurons that they form a circuit in a new nucleus. So it's very dynamic, the research in this field. But we can divide the amygdala nuclei in three clusters. You have the central nucleus, this yellow one. Then you have the basolateral nuclei and the corticomedial nuclei. So this structure regulates emotion, fear, rage, sexual behavior, and most importantly, facial recognition. Because when you look a person in the face, you already interpret that feeling. Okay? So it's really very important. Like, before I made a bad joke that didn't make much of a sense. I realized that it was perceived as, inappropriate, and I made up immediately, apologizing and say, listen, it was just a bad joke. So facial expression tell you already the emotional background of the person you're looking at. So it's extremely important. If you do an fMRI while you look at someone in the face, you will have activation of the amygdala. So that's a crucial aspect in emotion. Imagine also, sexual behavior, all sorts of other emotional aspects of our life. So it's extremely important. So remember, these three clusters of nuclei. Like